Welcome back to our journey through Biblical Greek. In our lecture today, we are looking at punctuation and syllabification. And these two topics are very important again in helping you learn how to pronounce words and also introduce you to some basic rules in Greek. So let's look at punctuation. So again, there are similarities between Greek and English because only two things are different. For example, a comma in Greek is the same as a comma in English. A period in Greek is the same as a period in English. But the difference comes in when you look at the semicolon. In Greek, a semicolon is a period above the line in English. So let me say it this way. A period above the line in English, this one here, is a semicolon in Greek. So if you want to present a semicolon in Greek, you use the English period above the line. And if you want to present a question mark in Greek, you use the English semicolon. So the semicolon for English is a question mark in Greek. Alright, so let me use the word logos to explain this. And logos means word. The Greek word logos means word. So on the screen we have Greek forms or Greek punctuation marks here on the left. And on the other side we have English translation or English meaning. Now we were saying a full stop in Greek, a period in Greek, is the same as a period in English. So when you see logos full stop, when you see logos period, when you're translating this means word period, word full stop, because a period in Greek is the same as a period in English. And that is the same as a comma. When you see logos comma, this means word comma because a comma in Greek is the same as a comma in English. Now these ones that are down here are the ones that are different. These ones that you find down here, these two are the ones that are different. For example, when you see logos and a period above the line, this is called a period above the line. When you see logos, period above the line, when you're translating this means word semicolon or word colon. So a period above the line in Greek means a semicolon or a colon in English. And the last one is the one that is very different. When you see a semicolon in Greek, for example, logos, semicolon, that means a question mark in English. I want to repeat that. A semicolon in Greek means a question mark in English. So when you see logos, semicolon, this means word question mark. Word question mark. So Greek has no question mark. It uses the semicolon as a question mark. So these are the punctuation marks that you find in Greek. It's very important to notice the last two ones because the last two ones are very unique. Let's move to accent marks. Remember, most of the things we discuss in this chapter 2, are meant to help you read Greek and pronounce Greek. So what are Greek accent marks? Greek accent marks are placed above vowels to show how a word is pronounced, specifically to show which syllable is stressed. They don't change the meaning of the word, but they help you to pronounce it correctly. So what is important here is to know the different kinds of accent marks and when they are used. For example, the first one is acute. That one there that you find on top of epsilon. That one is called acute. And then you have the second one called grave. The one that is slanting to the left, the one that is placed there on top of omicron. That one is called grave. And then you have circumflex, the one that is placed on top of omega. That one is called circumflex. So there are three different accent marks that you find in Greek. And all these are used to show which letter receives emphasis when you're pronouncing the word. For example, the first one is I tell, so you emphasize the epsilon. And the second one is theos, theos, you emphasize omicron. Agnos, agnos, you emphasize the omega. So the three accent marks in Greek are used to show which letters are being emphasized when you're pronouncing the words. Our next part is syllabification. So what is to syllabify a word? What is syllabification? Syllabification, or to syllabify a word, is to divide a word into different pieces so that we can pronounce it. So when you syllabify a word, you simply divide it into different pieces to show how it can be pronounced. So among the important parts in knowing Greek is syllabification because it tells you how to pronounce a word. And when you look at syllabification, there are two methods that will help you learn how to divide the words. Number one, you learn by the rules. And we're going to look at some of the rules that you follow for you to divide a word so that you can pronounce it. And number two is to listen to somebody who knows Greek. For example, me. You listen to me and listen to how I'm pronouncing the words and follow so that you can learn how to pronounce the words. So let's look at how to syllabify the words. Rule number one, there must be only one vowel or diphthong per syllable. Now, what we mean by syllable are these parts that you have divided. These pieces that are formed after dividing the word. All these are called syllables. The pieces that you have formed after syllabifying, after dividing the word. These are called syllables. And rule number one says, there is only one vowel or diphthong per syllable. What this means is that per piece or per part or per syllable, there must be only one vowel sound. And that vowel sound can come from two options. Number one, it can come from a single vowel or it can come from a diphthong. But remember, at no point should you have two vowels per syllable. So what you need to be doing to apply rule number one is this. From the left to the right, you start looking for vowels. You need to know the difference between a consonant and a vowel. And we say that there are 7 vowels in the Greek. And when you remove those 7 vowels, all the letters that remain are called consonants. So you need to know what vowels are and what consonants are, because without knowing the difference between a vowel and a consonant, you can't apply this rule. So what you need to do to apply the rule, for you to start dividing a word into syllables, you start from the left looking for vowels, and when you reach a vowel, immediately after the vowel, you place that line. Immediately after the vowel, you put your line. Immediately after the vowel, you put your demarcation. Immediately after your vowel, you divide. That's how you syllabify a word. So we said you start from the left, looking for vowels, and when you find a vowel, immediately after the vowel, you divide. Immediately after the vowel, you divide. After the vowel, you divide. After the vowel, you divide. Unless there's a diphthong. And again, by now you need to know what a diphthong is. Last time we said a diphthong is a situation where you have two vowels next to each other, but those two vowels cannot be and should not be divided because they make one sound. So we have two examples there. We have two words. We have akekoamen on top and we have ionos. The first example there shows a situation where you divide immediately after a vowel, because in the word akekoamen, there is no diphthong there. You may think omicron and alpha form a diphthong, but we said that yes, even though there are two vowels next to each other, they do not qualify to be a diphthong, because you look at the second vowel, and the second vowel here is alpha. And these two, because of alpha being the second vowel, these two do not qualify to be a diphthong, because a diphthong is formed by having two vowels, and the second vowel must always be iota or upsilon. So, rule number one says, divide immediately after a vowel unless the two vowels next to each other are a diphthong. And here you have omicron and alpha, and omicron and alpha are not a diphthong. That's why we have split them, because they do not qualify to be a diphthong. But when you look at the second example there, ionos, the word ionos, the first two vowels qualify to be a diphthong because you have alpha and iota. And we said two vowels qualify to be a diphthong if the second vowel among the two vowels is either iota or upsilon. And here you have two vowels and the second is iota. So alpha and iota qualify to be a diphthong. And so when you're dividing or syllabifying this word, ionos, you do not split immediately after alpha, because you would be splitting a diphthong. They are pronounced as one sound, and so a diphthong is never to be split, is never to be divided. And that's why I've split after iota instead of after alpha. So rule number one says, split or divide immediately after a vowel unless you have a diphthong. And in a case where you have a diphthong, split after the diphthong, because the diphthong is counted as one sound. So we have divided after a diphthong. After alpha and iota you divide, and after omega you divide, because you divide immediately after a vowel, and after iota you divide. And take note, you do not divide after omicron, because sigma would stand alone and the consonant cannot stand alone. there should never be a case where a consonant is standing alone. So when you look at the first example there, the last letter is nu. And because a consonant cannot stand alone, nu goes with the previous vowel. So two things to note: never should you have a consonant standing alone, because a consonant cannot stand alone and make up a syllable. And point number two, never should you have two vowels per syllable. You should always have one vowel per syllable, unless if you have a diphthong. So again, to remind you, starting from the left to the right, always look for vowels and divide immediately after the vowel unless there's a diphthong. In that case, you skip the diphthong and you divide immediately after the diphthong. So rule number 1 says there should be one vowel per syllable unless you have a diphthong. So again, you can tell that syllabification is very important to how you pronounce the word, because you always pronounce the word according to how you have divided the word. For example, the first one is akekoamen, akekoamen. And the second one is aionos, aionios, aionios. You always pronounce the word based on how you have divided the word. So that's why it's important to learn how to syllabify Greek words, because it tells you how to pronounce the word. Let's look at rule number 2. Rule number 2 says a single consonant by itself, and when we say a single consonant, we're not talking about a consonant cluster. So a single consonant by itself goes with the next or following vowel. Let's look at the example. In the example, you have the word eurakamen, eurakamen. Always use rule number 1 as your starting point. So to use rule number 1, we said divide immediately after a vowel. So we will start looking for vowels. So the first vowel is epsilon in this word. So after epsilon, we divide. And the next vowel is omega. After omega, you divide. The next vowel is alpha. After alpha, you divide. The next vowel is alpha again. After alpha, you divide. And the next vowel is epsilon. And after epsilon, we should divide, but will not divide because nu, which is a consonant, should not stand alone, because consonants cannot stand by themselves. So to apply rule number 2, what we mean by single consonants, in this case we have 3 single consonants. We have ro, we have kappa, and we have mu. And rule number 2 says every single consonant must follow the next vowel, must be attached to the next vowel. And in this case, we have applied it because we have rho, which is attached to the next vowel alpha, and we have kappa, which is going with alpha, and we have mu, which is going with epsilon, and we have nu, the last one, which is going again with epsilon. So you can have 2 consonants per syllable, but you can't have 2 vowels per syllable unless if the 2 vowels are a diphthong. So as you can see, there's only 1 vowel per syllable in this case because we do not have a diphthong. So a single consonant goes with the next vowel. A single consonant always goes with the next vowel. Let's look at rule number 3. Rule number 3 says 2 consecutive vowels, 2 vowels that are next to each other, that do not form a diphthong must be divided. 2 vowels, 2 consecutive vowels that do not form a diphthong must be divided. Let's look at our example in Greek. We have the word ethiasametha, ethiasametha. So rule number 3 says, in the case we have 2 vowels that are next to each other, for example, you have epsilon and alpha, these are next to each other, but do not qualify to be a diphthong because the second vowel should have been iota or upsilon for them to be qualifying to be a diphthong. So in this case, they do not qualify to be a diphthong. Every time you have 2 vowels that do not qualify to be a diphthong in a word, they should be split, they should be divided. And to make your work easy, always look for vowels in the word. Always look for vowels. Let the vowels be guiding you on where to divide. So we start by looking at the vowels. The first vowel is epsilon. Immediately after epsilon, we divide. The next vowel is epsilon again. Immediately after epsilon, we divide because these 2 vowels do not qualify to be a diphthong. The next vowel is alpha. And immediately after alpha, you divide. The next vowel again is alpha. Immediately after alpha, you divide. The next one is epsilon, and you divide. And the last one is alpha. So rule number 2 was saying every consonant that is single must go with the next vowel. So you have theta that is going with epsilon, and you have sigma that is going with alpha. You have mu, which is going with epsilon, and you have theta, which is going with alpha. So that's how you apply rule number 1, number 2, and number 3. And after syllabifying the word, now we can pronounce it. Etheasametha. Etheasametha. Let's look at rule number 4. A consonant cluster that cannot be pronounced together is divided. And by consonant cluster, we mean two consonants next to each other. So a group of consonants that cannot be pronounced must be divided. Let's look at our Greek example. You have the word apekomai. Apekomai. How do you divide this word? So let's start by using rule number 1 that says divide immediately after a vowel. But before we do that, let's look at consonant clusters that we have in this word. We have ro and kai, and these are next to each other. These are consonant clusters. Two or more consonants are called consonant cluster. So rule number 4 says every time you have two consonants that are next to each other but cannot be pronounced, for example, you have ro and kai, it's more like you have r and ch. These cannot be pronounced, and so they must be divided. And every time you have a consonant cluster, they must be split. But let's try to divide the entire word by using rule number 1. Rule number 1 says, look for vowels, and after every vowel, divide. So the first vowel is alpha, and after alpha, we divide. We look for the next vowel, which is epsilon. After epsilon, we should divide. But you see, if we divide after epsilon, it means that rho, which is a consonant, will stand alone because we should divide after alpha and divide between rho and chi because these two are a consonant cluster. And so if you divide here and here, it leaves rho standing alone. And we said that a consonant cannot stand alone. So instead of dividing after epsilon, you are to divide after rho, so that rho is attached to a vowel because a consonant cannot stand alone. And we go to our next vowel, which is omicron. After omicron, you divide. And our next vowel is alpha. And as you can see here, after alpha, we should divide, but never should you make a mistake of dividing two vowels that qualify to be a diphthong. As in this case, you have alpha and iota, and alpha and iota qualify to be a diphthong. So instead of dividing after alpha, you will not divide because the two vowels are a diphthong. So again, rule number 4 says, every time you have two consonants that are next to each other, these two consonants must be split only if they can't be pronounced, as in the case for ro and kai. So an easy thing to be doing is to be putting the letters into English so that you can see if they can be pronounced or cannot be pronounced. For example, ro is r and kai is ch. So where you have r and ch next to each other, these cannot be pronounced. So you split between the two. Let's go to rule number 5. Rule number 5 says a consonant cluster that can be pronounced together goes with the following vowel, goes with the next vowel. Let's look at our Greek example. We have the word Christos, Christos. And again, how you read the word is how you have divided the word. So let's look at how to divide this word. Always use rule number 1. Look for vowels, and after every single vowel, you should divide, unless there are two vowels and those two vowels are qualifying to be a diphthong. So in this case, our first vowel is iota, and after iota, we are going to divide. And our next vowel is omicron, and after omicron, we should divide. But if we divide after omicron, it leaves sigma standing alone, and the consonant cannot stand alone. But let's apply rule number 5. Rule number 5 says a consonant cluster, a group of consonants, two consonants that are next to each other, that can be pronounced, should not be divided but be attached to the next vowel. For example, here we have chi, which is ch in English, and we have ro, which is r. So you have chr, and chr can be pronounced. What we mean by can be pronounced is that the letters that are next to each other that can begin a word in English or in Greek. For example, you have chr, and chr can begin a word in English as well as in Greek. For example, in this case, you have Christos, and Christos means Christ. And because chi and ro can begin a word, we do not divide them as in the previous example. Another example is sigma and tau. We should have split between sigma and tau, but because the two consonants can begin a word, they are attached to the next vowel. So rule number 5 says, every time you have two consonants, check if those two consonants can begin a word. If they can begin a word, do not split in between them. Attach them to the next vowel. But if the two consonants cannot begin a word, they must be divided. Let's move to rule number 6. Rule number 6 says double consonants are divided. Double consonants are divided. Let's look at the example given. We have the word paresia. Paresia. What do we mean by double consonants? Double consonant is a situation where you have two same consonants. It could be beta and beta, or gamma and gamma, or as in this case you have rho and rho. These two consonants are called double consonants because they are similar. A case where you have similar consonants is called double consonant. And a case where you have different consonants is called a consonant cluster. So we're saying whenever you have two similar consonants next to each other, those consonants, when you're syllabifying the word, they must be split. They must be divided. So let's see how we can syllabify this word. Our first rule says, look for vowels and divide immediately after a vowel. So our first vowel here is alpha, and after alpha we should divide. But because of this rule that says similar consonants must be divided, instead of dividing after alpha, because if we divide after alpha and we divide in between rho and rho, it makes the first rho to stand alone, and the consonant cannot stand alone. So instead of dividing immediately after alpha, you divide in between rho and rho, the ones that are double consonants. And next you look for the next vowel. Our next vowel is eta, and after eta you divide, and you look for the next vowel. Our next vowel is iota. After iota you divide. Why are we dividing in between the last two vowels? We are dividing in between these two vowels because the two vowels do not qualify to be a diphthong. If the two vowels were a diphthong, we would keep them together, but because iota and alpha do not qualify to be a diphthong, we split them. And so how do you read this word? This word is read as paresia. Paresia. If you learn how to syllabify a word, you are learning how to pronounce the word. So it's very important to know how to syllabify a Greek word. Let's look at the last rule, rule number 7. Rule number 7 says compound words are divided where they are joined. Compound words are divided where they are joined. And we have the example that is given, antichristos. The word antichristos. Why have we split here? We have split here because in this word antichristos, there are two words that are joined to form one word. We have anti and Christos. Christos means Christ. Anti means against. And so this is where you get the word antichrist. These are two words that are joined to form one word, antichristos. And so when you're syllabifying a compound word, the first thing that you do is you split where the two words are joined. In this case, you have two words, anti and Christos. So you split between anti and Christos, between iota and chi. And that is not the end. After you split where they're joined, you now apply all the rules that you have learned, but use rule number 1 as a summary of all the rules. Rule number 1 says, look for vowels and divide every after a vowel. The first vowel is alpha, as you can see on the final result at the bottom there. And we should have divided after alpha, but you can see nu and tau are next to each other, and these are consonant clusters. And we said consonant clusters, two consonants that are next to each other, that cannot start a word, that cannot be pronounced, must be split. For example, you have nu and tau. Nu is N in English, and tau is T. So you have N and T. N and T cannot be pronounced. They can't start a word. And so because they can't start a word, they must be split. And so rule number 1 says, look for vowels and divide every after a vowel. But if we split after alpha and we split in between nu and tau, it leaves nu to stand alone, and the consonant cannot stand on its own. It needs to be supported by a vowel. And so instead of splitting after alpha, you split in between nu and tau. And you move on to the next vowel being iota, and you split after iota. Again, why are we not splitting between chi and rho? Because chi and rho can begin a word. For example, Christos. So they can begin a word. Though they are a consonant cluster, but it's a consonant cluster that is pronounceable. They can be pronounced. And so rule number 6 says, these should not be split. Split only consonant clusters that cannot begin a word or cannot be pronounced. So you split after iota, and you look for the next vowel, which is iota again. Again, you split after iota. Again, you have sigma and tau, and these are a consonant cluster, but they are pronounceable and can begin a word. And so we're not going to split between sigma and tau because these two are a consonant cluster that is pronounceable and can begin a word. And so you move on to the next vowel being omicron. And immediately after omicron, you should divide, but do not divide because when you divide, sigma will stand alone and the consonant cannot stand alone. So how do you pronounce this word? It's antichristos. Antichristos. So you can see that how you syllabify a word is how you pronounce a word. If you syllabify a word in the wrong way, you're going to affect the pronunciation of the word. As we look at syllabification, take note that these syllables have names. These pieces that you have created have names. For example, in the word anthropos, which means man, how you syllabify it is that you look for vowels and you divide immediately after a vowel. For example, the first vowel is alpha. We should have divided immediately after alpha, but we have nu and theta, and nu and theta are a consonant cluster, and these two consonants cannot be pronounced. So we split between nu and theta. And you move on to the next vowel, which is omega, and split after omega. And you move on to the next vowel, which is omicron, and we should have split after omicron, but sigma will stand alone, so we do not split. So you're going to have two syllables, alpha and nu as the first syllable, theta rho omega as the second syllable, pi omicron sigma as the third syllable. And so what we're saying is that the first three syllables that you've created, each one of these syllables has names. For example, the first syllable is always called antipenult, and the second syllable is called penult. The last syllable is called ultima. So you have antipenult, penult, and ultima. So what is important here is to practice reading the words and practice syllabifying the word, because if you can syllabify, if you can divide the word, that gives you a clue on how to read or pronounce the word. So here's a summary of what we've looked at so far. We've looked at how punctuation marks work in Greek, and we've said we have 4 punctuation marks. You have a comma, you have the period, and you have a semicolon, and you have a question mark. And we've looked at accent marks, and we've said we have 3 accent marks. We have acute, grave, and circumflex. And lastly, we looked at syllabification, and we said to syllabify a word is to divide a word so that you can pronounce it. And we said that the way you syllabify a word is the way you read the word. As you are learning Greek, you are learning new words, but this should not worry you because there are 319 words that are very common in the Greek New Testament. And these ones take up 80% of the words that you find in the New Testament. And so when you learn these 319 words, you're learning almost 90% of words that you'll find in the New Testament. And these about 300 words are the words that you'll find me presenting on the screen and reading and using in the exercises, as well as the quizzes that you'll be having. So when you learn the 319 words, you are basically learning 80% of all the words that you find in the Greek New Testament. Let's look at chapter 2 vocabulary. Pay attention to how I'm reading the word. Our first example is Galilea. Galilea. As I said it previously, if you can pronounce a word, sometimes it will give you a clue on what the word might mean in English. So you have Galilea, and Galilea means Galilee. Next word is doxa. Doxa. And doxa is where we get the word doxology, the English word doxology. So doxa means glory. It means glory. The next word is eschatos. Eschatos. And this is where we get the English word eschatology, the study of last events. So eschatos means last. The next word is zoe. Zoe. You have zeta, omega, eta. Zoe. And this is where we get the English word zoo. So zoe means life. The next word is cosmos. Cosmos. And this is where we get the English word cosmology, the study of the world. So cosmos means world. The other word is logos. Logos. And logos means word. The next word is pneuma. Pneuma. You have pi, nu, epsilon, upsilon, mu, alpha. Pneuma. Remember, that is not V, but it's N. So it's pneuma. And pneuma means spirit. The other word is Abram. 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 Names of people always start with a capital letter. And Abram means Abram. So other words are very simple. If you can pronounce the words, it will give you a clue on what the word actually means in English. Next word is Dawid. Dawid, meaning David. That first letter there is capital D. Next word is Paulos. 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 And you have the capital P. That first letter there is capital P. So you have Paulos. And Paulos means Paul. Next word is Petros. Petros. Again, the first letter there is capital P. So you have Petros. And Petros means Peter. The other word is Pilatos. Pilatos. Pilatos means pilot. The other word is Simon. Simon. And Simon means Simon. That first letter there is the capital S. Is a capital S. But don't worry about it. In Greek, we always focus on small letters. And capital letters are always used on names of people. So they are very rare to find. The next word is Adelphos. Adelphos. And Adelphos means brother. Brother. Next word is Aquo. Aquo. You have that diphthong there. So you pronounce it as one sound. Omicron upsilon is pronounced as one sound. So you have Aquo. Aquo. And Aquo means I hear. The next word is Echo. Echo. Echo means I have. I have. The next word is Uyos. 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 And Uyos means son. The other word is Pharisios. Pharisios. Pharisios means Pharisee. And so go through the words, learn how to pronounce them, and learn what they mean in English, because these words will come in the quiz. Until next time, God bless.